Welcome to One Church Ripon Campus. For more information, including upcoming events, how to get plugged in, and details on how to give, visit our website at www.visitonechurch.com/Ripon. You can also find us on social media.
Morning, everybody. Lots of water today. All right.
How does this work?
You gotta push the button.
Oh, fancy.
There.
We got iPad stands. There you go. Hashtag Amazon. Awesome.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Yeah.
It's been an exciting weekend around here, and lots of stuff going on. I'm really excited for this morning. I feel like we're going to talk about parenting, and I feel like that God spoke to us about this very directly and with a purpose, and I feel like God spoke to us about this for us. Not necessarily for you, but also for you, but like because we need this in our lives. We need help. We need God to guide us as we're raising two children. And so what we pass on to you guys this morning from the Lord, I just want you to know that it didn't get to you without first piercing through our hearts and being filtered through us as parents. And so I'm excited for this morning. Also, we hope that parents, you guys will join us tonight for just a kind of a town meeting sort of gathering that we can just kind of share some different things and give you some different tips on kids and culture and all that sort of stuff that goes along with that. It's a crazy world out there, and we're raising kids in it. So
I think it'll be a great conversation. It's a conversation, and so we're opening up a conversation as a church that we can start diving into what's going on, like Dave said, in our culture and what our kids are facing, and some of it we don't even realize that our kids are facing these things, or the depth of it, or even how to protect them and lead them through it, help them navigate through it. So it'll be a great conversation. So tonight at 6, meet us in the rear classroom. Youth will be in here. And then let me just ask you this, which we don't really have childcare yet, but find childcare for your kids so that in the rear classroom we can have some good open dialogue without having to kind of filter it for little ears. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, and then also, you can open your Bible to 1 Samuel chapter 2. That's where we're going to go today. It gives you some time. But I don't know if you heard about this. Kirk Cameron has a new movie. It's like a documentary coming out this week, and it is all around this thought of parenting and social media and protecting our kids and helping navigate our kids through it. And in fact, he goes as far, he says, we are the pioneer parents. We can't go to our parents and say, hey, how did you teach me? How did you help me navigate social media and all that? Right? We're the pioneer parents figuring out how to navigate this for our kids. So take a look at this clip because I think it's only in theaters for 2 days.
We have an interesting tradition at our house. On Mother's Day, she goes out and she buys gifts for the kids. Well, one Mother's Day, Chelsea says to me, I want to get the kids smartphones, all of them. I said, okay, let's do it. Let's get the kids smartphones. I mean, what could be simpler? And what could possibly go wrong?
And then I saw a story on the news of what happened to a man named Tim Woda and his son.
There was this grown man who was soliciting my child. And I said, where'd you meet this person? He said, I met this person on Facebook. I said, well, that's not possible because you don't have a Facebook account. He had this whole digital life that I'd had no idea it even existed.
I decided I needed to get to the bottom of understanding how technology and my kids were interacting.
Unfortunately, a lot of parents are saying just do whatever you want.
50% of kids feel they're addicted to their social media.
Yeah, if you're a kid with a smartphone, you could look up anything you want.
It's a free-for-all. You can look at pornography. There's constant reinforcement, pings, tings, new friends.
I got to create my life the way I want it to be seen. It wasn't my true reality.
My daughter has tons of Instagram friends, but she has no friends.
They're more like strangers that have been identified.
That becomes their life, their social media world. But that world can be quickly upended.
If we don't help our kids by preparing them for this world, then who will? There's never been a generation like it. We're blazing a new trail. We are the pioneer parents.
Tuesday, February 27th and March 1st, it'll be at AMC right here. And so, parents, I think it's a great win for us to go see one of those showings. Okay, let's dive in. Open to 1 Samuel chapter 2. And the Old Testament right here tells this story of a little boy hearing the voice of God for the very first time. Okay, maybe you're familiar with this story. He's tucked into bed that night and falls fast asleep, and during the night, he hears someone call his name, Samuel. And so, he sits up in bed, and he's like, what? And so he heads down the hallway, and he runs into the room next door where Eli the priest is asleep, and he wakes him up, Eli, Eli! And Eli, startles, comes to wake, and he says, you called me? And Eli says, I didn't call you, boy. Go back to sleep. So Samuel runs back down the hallway, crawls back into bed, falls asleep. A second time, he hears the call again, Samuel. Samuel sits up in bed, runs back down the hallway into Eli the priest's bedroom, wakes him up, hey, you called me? And Eli says, I didn't call you, go back to bed. Third time it happens, Samuel goes back to bed, hears the call again, Samuel. Samuel jumps up, runs back down the hallway, Eli, did you call me? And Eli now, this third time, realizes it's the Lord who's calling this young boy. And so he tells Samuel, he says, go lie down, and if the Lord calls to you again, just say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And so Samuel, I can just imagine, wide-eyed, God is calling my name. So Samuel runs back to bed, crawls into bed, and sure enough, God calls to him again, Samuel. And Samuel says, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And God, right in that moment, tells Samuel, I'm about to change some things throughout Israel. And I need a leader, and it's going to be you. So here's this young boy. And as a kid, I remember hearing this story. I remember learning this story in church. I remember memorizing 1 Samuel 3:10. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Because I wanted to be that young kid. I wanted God to speak to me. I wanted to be used by God. So I memorized that, God, use me. Speak, Lord, I'm listening. But as I got older, I realized the depth of this story. Okay, it's not just about the beginning of this young boy's journey into spiritual leadership. It's also a story about the old man, the priest that's in the other room. It's also a story about this older priest, and it's a story of loss. It's a story of heartbreak, because Eli is now laying in bed. This old man, the priest over Israel, he's laying in bed, fully awake now, probably remembering, God used to call me like that. There was a time when God used to use me like that, where he had lined up to use my family like that. And apparently now, God's calling someone else's name. And here's Eli, the spiritual leader over all of Israel, but now he's being passed on by God.
So here's the problem in Eli's home. Eli's got two sons. The guy who's laying here and recognizing that he's being passed over by God. He's got two sons, and he absolutely loves these two sons as much as you or I love our kids. He absolutely loves his two sons. But here's the problem: is that he loves his sons more than he loves the things, the promises of God. Which means this, that Eli is more concerned with his son's happiness, with their day-to-day well-being and their happiness, than he is with their son's holiness in their lives. And as a parent, I think it's so easy. I think it's such a slippery slope. I think that we can so easily fall into this trap where we want the best for our kids. And that's a good thing, right? We want the best for our kids. We want our kids the desires of their hearts to be fulfilled. And the problem is that we want that more than we want God's desires, God's plans for their life. We're more about our kids' dreams than we are for God's dreams and plans for their life. And we put more stock in our kids' future than we put in God's future for our kids.
And Eli, like his sons would help dad out with some of the things at the church, right? Dad's the priest of Israel. And so here's these boys, they're growing up, and so, they would greet the women as they came to church, but then they would help themselves to the women who came to church. And they would take the offering at church, and then they would help themselves to the offering that was taken at church. You see what I'm saying? So they were like involved in some areas, but man, they had this lifestyle on the other side, and their dad, the priest, knew about it. He knew about the boys' relationships. He knew about their lifestyle. He knew they were taking out of the offering, and he would yell at them, but that's all he would do. And right before we have the whisper to Samuel, we have 1 Samuel chapter 2, look at verse 27, where God is talking to Eli, the dad, the priest. It says, now a man of God, look at verse 27 with me. Now a man of God came to Eli and said to him, this is what the Lord says to you. Did I not clearly reveal myself to your ancestors' family when they were in Egypt under Pharaoh? I chose your ancestors, Eli, out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priests, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod in my presence. Okay, he's saying, I chose your lineage, Eli. I also gave your ancestors' family all the food offerings presented by the Israelites. Why then do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? God's saying, Eli, haven't I given you everything you need? Haven't I lined up your lineage to be the spiritual leaders of Israel? So why are you living like this? And then look at line 29. He says, why do you honor your sons more than me? By fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel. Eli, why do you honor your sons more than you honor me? And that word honor there, it means to give weight to. So he's saying you give more weight to your sons than to God. You give more weight to your son's happiness than to following God's holiness. And so here's these boys who grew up without a heart after God. And so God could not keep them as the spiritual leaders of Israel. God takes his promise away. So look at verse 30 now. Therefore, the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that members of your family would minister before me forever. But now, the Lord declares, far be it from me. Those who honor me, I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained. Next chapter, God calls Samuel because God needs new leadership.
So this is where we want to start this morning. We want to hit a topic that so many of us, I believe that, and again, this has gone through this dad first. The Lord has spoke this to us. That we need to go back and get some refreshers on some certain things, and that's this: how do we do parenting that is strategic? How do we do parenting that is thought out, strategic and thought out, not just like reactionary to like the daily grind that can just get absolutely bonkers sometimes. For a lot of us, we're raising kids, and our thing is, well, I bring my kids to church, and I sit here and I send them off here and there, and just that's, as we read this story in the Bible, that's the same thing that Eli did. His boys grew up in church. Those kids grew up in church, running around, drinking the coffee, screaming out in the front lawn, all that sort of stuff. They went to church. Those are what my kids did this morning. It actually wasn't.
Hopefully not coffee.
It was water, but for a second there, I thought it was coffee. There was a second there. I had the lid on the little cup, and I was like, but they were chugging it too fast to be scalding hot coffee. So, but these boys grew up in church, and here's the thing. They grew up around the things of God, but they were not shown how to walk in the ways of God. And these are two very different things. And so many times when it gets to our spiritually raising our kids, when we're like, okay, I'm in the process of spiritually raising our kids, we think that's it. We just bring our kids to church and we can check that one off the box. And I just think, man, really? That's your spiritual plan? That's my spiritual plan? That's kind of heavy. Like that's the spiritual plan. Do you realize that we don't do that in any other area of education or pursuit of anything? My bet is that, like when we're taking our kids to school every single day, and a lot of us do that, either you're taking them to high school or junior high or elementary school or preschool or whatever it may be. We take our kids to school every single day, and you guys a lot like us probably ask the kids the same two questions every single day after school. First one is, how was your day? Hey, how was your day today? And then the second question is this: do you have any homework? Like we get like, how was your day? Okay, okay. Seriously though, do you have any homework? And that's kind of where we go with that. So every single day, Sunday or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're checking in. We're checking in at the homework. We follow up with that. And here's why: because it matters. Like the homework matters. I am very grateful that I do not have homework anymore in my life. I get really sad and depressed when my kids open up and they go through their homework, but it's an important part. It's a necessary part of life because your grade depends on it. Your GPA depends on it. The school that you want to eventually attend and get a higher level of education depends on this. And so we're diligent in that, in following up with our kids in this because it's important to us. But don't forget this. Mom, Dad, don't forget this. As good as those things are, they're temporary. Education only lasts for a life, for while we're here on earth. It's a very temporary situation where our spirituality, our walk with God, becoming men and women of God, that's eternal.
Yeah.
And it has eternal ramifications. It's a massive difference between, okay, kids go to Sunday school, and checking and following up and having that conversation with our kids. And so this morning we want to talk about some parenting wisdom to help us along in this journey from Proverbs. Open up to Proverbs 24. We're going to jump into that. Proverbs, the wisest dude in the Bible, wrote these things out, and the wisest dude human to ever live wrote these things out. And a lot of Proverbs Samuel is writing to his sons, and so I think there's a lot for us to learn here as parents. And so go ahead and open up to Proverbs 24. And just as a funny illustration, this is what it would look like if we left parenting up to our kids right here. There's a picture of me tied up. And obviously, it's a staged picture. We originally tried this picture with me and Kim both tied up and then the kids doing that, but then we realized there's no one actually to take the picture right there. So then she hopped out and we took the picture. And let's be honest, I would dominate them. They wouldn't be able to tie me up whatsoever. But anyways, sometimes as parents, we kind of feel this way. Sometimes we feel like, man, we had these cute little fuzzy kids, and they're all neat and cute, and, even changing diapers doesn't even bother us.
Did you just call them fuzzy?
Yes. I don't know. My mind goes to, like, little baby gremlin I don't know. Anyway, but I think as parents, we can feel this way sometimes. Like we had these amazing little kids, and then all of a sudden we can feel like we're being held hostage by them. And so Solomon, in his wisdom, he said this, and I want us to take away some tremendous wisdom and advice from Solomon, the wisest guy.
So if you're taking notes this morning, taking notes on the app, great place to take notes, and you can email them to yourself, or there's a note sheet there in your bulletin. Here's some wisdom we have pulled from the book of Proverbs on how to be wise parents. Okay, and there's 6 of them, so we're going to kind of boom, 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 move through them. Number 1 is this. There's a big difference between building a house and building a home. Okay, building a house, great thing. Okay, when we lived up in Rockland, we purchased a brand new home, and, we got to pick out the flooring and the countertops and the appliances, right? We built a great house, but that doesn't make it a home, right? It's a lot more than just being inhabited by people. That's not what makes a house a home. So Proverbs 24, verse 3, gives us some wisdom in this. It says, by wisdom, a house is built. Through understanding, it's established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. So 3 things. By wisdom, through understanding, and through knowledge, you're going to build your home. And then As we begin to wrap ourselves around these three words, like wisdom and understanding who God is and how he interacts with us and how he becomes the center of our life through which we make all of our decisions, not just a category over here, but understanding how he is at the center of everything. Through knowledge, you're going to build your home, and then you're going to be amazed at what you find in those rooms. It says rare and beautiful treasures. You're going to find a place that people want to run to, not run from. That's a home.
I love how Proverbs 14:1 puts it again. This is the wise guy. He says, "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down." By the same hands, a person who can build up a house can be the one that's like actually ripping a home apart, can tear your own home down. See, a house has a mom in it, like just a house has a mom in it. But a home has a mom in it who's building up people, who's speaking words of life, who's speaking words that encourage rather than just always like, your room's always filthy, dirty, this, that, that's just a house. But a home that has a mom in it who's like nurturing and loving and caring and equipping and building. A house might have a man living in it, but a home has a man who is present when he's there, engaged, contributing to the life of the house, to the spiritual life of the home, to the spiritual well-being of kids. There's a difference between just being at home, men, just like existing there, and like being a part of building a home for your family. A home has to be strategic. It doesn't just happen. We have to be purposeful in this. And it takes godly strategy to turn a house into a godly home.
Let's look at number 2. Godly living is caught more than taught.
That's good.
Okay, turn over to Proverbs chapter 3. Beginning of Proverbs. If you look at verse 1, we're going to read a couple of verses here. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 1. So Solomon, he's really encouraging his son. He says, "My son, don't forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablets of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and in the sight of man." So Solomon here is reflecting, maybe those words, that wording sounds familiar to you. Solomon is actually reflecting on the wording from an earlier book of the Bible, from Deuteronomy chapter 6. If you remember in Deuteronomy 6, God is telling Moses, God gives Moses the 10 Commandments, gives him these guidelines for how godly people will live in relationship to God. And so Moses is then telling the people, hey, this is the way to godly living. This is what is going to bring life to you. And so he tells them, love the Lord your God. This is in Deuteronomy 6. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Keep God's ways in front of you. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. So Solomon, here in Proverbs, is teaching his son the same wisdom that Moses was teaching all the Israelites about their relationship with the Lord. Solomon is telling his son, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And then you impress them on your kids, right? Make an impression, make a mark, make it a part of them as well. But see, here's the dilemma for us. Most of our spiritual life is internal. Okay? Our kids don't get to see it. This is the dilemma part. Because maybe they see mom and dad going to church, but so much of our spirituality as parents is internal. So do your kids know if you pray during the day? Do your kids know what you pray about? Do your kids know how often you pray? See what I mean? How there's so much God is doing on the inside of us, but how much do your kids really see? And if your kid doesn't know that mom prays, if your kid doesn't know that dad prays, here's my bet. Your kid's not praying. Because he doesn't know that his heroes are praying. So that's why it's saying whenever you walk together, talk about the teachings, what God's teaching you. Whenever you're with your kids, talk to them about it. Talk about the answered prayers, what God's been answering. Share it with them.
That's good.
Talk about God's love and forgiveness. When they have a situation at school, don't just give them parental advice. Say, man, do you know what God did for me? Like, relate it to what God is doing for us and relate it to them. Reiterate lyrics that are on, maybe there's something that comes up on the radio that you guys are listening to, good or bad. Pause it and say, do you hear what that's saying? What do you think about that? What do you think? How does that play into what God says for us? Worldly values, godly values. And if it's a godly moment, say, man, isn't that what we want to be about? Do you see that? So use teaching points. Pay attention to what's going on. It has been incredible. Some gals in our church, I have been on jury duty, and for the last 6 weeks, and I think I have like 6 weeks more, and some gals in our church said, hey, we want to do a meal train for you and provide meals, and I mean, just overwhelmed us, right? But you know what? As meals were coming to our home for dinner, which we were so blessed, you better believe my kids knew where those meals came from. And I just said, man, look at this. Do you know why? This is what a church family, they're taking care of one another. Man, Bonnie and Gary, they showed up because they care. You know, and I had to just talk to them about what a church family does for one another. Like, talk about why we're going to Mexico to build a house. Talk about why we give to Kingdom Builders. Impress these on our kids every chance we get, when we're sitting at home, when you go out, before bed, around the dinner table, at the grocery store, in the car, on the way to school. Drip these things into their life, because this isn't just something that's taught in weekly church services. It's an example that we set so our kids can catch it.
That is good stuff, I'm telling you. So, church, I really want us to understand this. I want you parents to really understand this, that the job of spiritually training your kids is not the job of our youth pastors or our children's pastor. These are incredible people. Their lives are purposed for this. They love your kids, and they want God's absolute very best for your kids. But ultimately, that's not their entire responsibility. You have a tremendous piece to play in that. Their job is to come alongside you and continue the journey that you have going along with your children in this spiritual journey. To encourage you, to encourage your kids, to help you to do things like True Love Waits Nights and talk about purity, and just to partner with the good things that are in God's Word that we're trying to drip into the lives of our kids, so that when they grow, when they become mature, they always have those seeds sown deep inside of their hearts. So don't just check in on their grades, and don't just check in on the sports. You must, I must, with my kids, I must check in with them and have spiritual conversations with them as often, if not more often, as anything else. I put a priority on things. I put a stamp of approval on things that I make a priority for my kids, and their spiritual journey has to be the priority. Again, I remind myself is that there's things that are temporary and there's things that are eternal. And the things that are eternal in my household, inside my heart, they just trump the things that are not eternal. Focus more on GOD rather than MVP or GPA or any of those other things. Those are all great things, but they're not God. They're not better than God. They can't replace God. They cannot become gods to our kids. And it's not that you have to spend the same amount of time doing these things. Like, I took my son to baseball practice. It was a 2-hour baseball practice. Now we have to go pray for 2 hours. It's not like time for time sort of a relationship. I'm saying that our children need to know without a doubt, a shadow of doubt in their minds and in their hearts, that their parents are far more concerned. I want Lily and Noah to know that I am far more concerned with who they are becoming spiritually more than how good they are at sports. I want my son to be the next Derek Carr. I want him to be a stud athlete. I want what's best for him. But that doesn't even compare to how badly I want to spend eternity in heaven with my son. Academics are great. Our physical bodies, our physical abilities, our mental abilities, they will fail us. GPAs can be great or they can be bad. Their hobbies, those are all awesome things, but man, spiritually, it's got to outweigh everything else. And I love this right here. if you're not writing notes, this one just memorize in your head. Is spiritually is caught far more than it's ever going to be taught.
Third one is this: every child needs consistent consequences, not empty threats. Proverbs 13:24 says it like this: whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. I love that word, careful. It's careful to discipline them. Proverbs 19:18 says this: discipline your children, for in that there's hope. Do not be a willing party to their death. And we've gotten to a form of discipline nowadays of screaming and yelling at our kids. Okay? And, a lot of it is just threats that don't have any consequences. Why? Well, because that is the easiest thing to do as a parent. And it is one of the worst parenting styles we can do, because there are no consequences that actually change their behavior, right? Only yelling. And the more we yell, the bigger we get, it just becomes more and more white noise to them. We tune them out. My brother used to tell my mom, "You're a screamer." And then
She's
she'd
Italian.
scream more. She is Italian. Have you ever visited a house right next to the train tracks? Our friends Matt and Michelle, they bought a house. I mean, their backyard was the cinder block wall of the train track. And so we'd be over their house having dinner, and then all of a sudden, and I'm telling you, everything is moving. We're just like, oh my goodness, right? What in the world? And they're like, what? They have gotten so used to it.
No, they were faking it. That was crazy.
They were like, what's that? It just has become, they got used to it. It became white noise to them. And sometimes our parenting style can become like a freight train. Okay, our kid has done something that needs correction, and we are just like, and we are that train that just comes barreling through.
I don't know that you've ever heard a train before, based on your.
Was that more like a monster? Whatever. But we get big, we get demonstrative, we get worked up. It works us up, it gets under our skin so much, and we become the crazy parent that's just yelling empty threats. You're gonna go to your room, you're gonna be grounded, we're gonna take your phone away, and we just yell these threats.
The truth is that consequences are what change behavior. Consequences are what's going to actually cause them to change. They do this is the result of it. In my house, I sit down and I said, this is how it works. I sit down with my kids, I look them in the eye, and I say, I'm going to ask you to do this, and you're going to do it. If you don't do it, here's what's going to happen. You're going to clean your room, or else I'm going to, whatever it's going to be. My famous empty threat, if we're being honest, is if you don't pick up your toys, I'm going to throw everything on the floor in the trash. I've never done it. But they must somehow believe that I'm going to do it, because they real quick go do it. But
I think you would do it.
I probably would. So here's how it works. I'm going to ask you to do this. You're going to do it. If you don't do it, here's going to be the consequence. This is what is going to happen. There has to be consistent consequences. Kids are smart. They're smart. They know the boundaries. They can hear what you're saying through what the words coming out of your mouth are. They know you're saying, I'm going to take your phone away. If you've never ever taken their phone away, if you've never come through on that consequence, there will be no change. Consequence is what helps make change.
And not just that one time, but every time that behavior comes, it has to be consistent consequence. When you do this, this will happen every time. And if it happens again, every time. And equally as harmful, I think, is the parent that just continually uses the phrase, because I said so. You're not preparing your kid for a life of following God by just saying, because I said so, and not giving them the context of why you're making this decision. And, God gives us rules, right? Here we have Scripture. God lays things out for us, and He never says, because I'm God. That's never His reasoning to us. God gives us guidelines and boundaries, and he always says it is to protect you and it is to provide for you. And here's how I want to protect your marriage. And here's how I want to protect you sexually. And here's how I want to protect you socially. And here's how I want to protect you emotionally. And here is the life that I have set apart for you. And it is full of blessing. But here is what will steal it away. And for our kids, rules without relationship leads to rebellion. When it is just hard lines and there is no conversation around it and painting the picture of it, when our kids can walk away understanding a decision process, it helps them to learn to make those decisions for themselves. Number 4 is this. We have to encourage far more than we discourage. Okay, and different sociologists give us different numbers on this, but it's somewhere between like 3 and 5 times, right? We need to say at least 3 to 5 times more encouraging things to our kids than discouraging them from things, right? You cannot withdraw more than you are depositing. So 3 to 5 more encouragements than corrections. Ephesians chapter 6. There was one from Proverbs, but I'm just going to Ephesians because this one's good, okay? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. I love how the Message puts it. It says, fathers, don't exasperate your children by coming down hard on them. Take them by the hand and lead them in the way of the master. Take them, don't just scream and yell. Take them by the hand and lead them in the way of the master. Kids spell love T-I-M-E. That's how they experience love, feel love. There is no substitution. It is that hanging out. It is that pouring into. And if you have a strong-willed child, if you have a child that you are constantly on, make sure that you're strategic with your encouragements and with spending time with them.
Our kids are so different. When I pick up Noah from he goes to Rapona right here. When I pick him up from school, man, it's like, I don't know how that kid talks so fast about so much stuff and content. Like, I'm sitting there trying to do like just regular, non-heroic driving through Ripon stop signs, and like, he's talking so much barrage that I'm like, oh, I got to stop at a stop sign right here. Just Miss Hanley did this. I got a superstar for this. I won this award. Blah 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 blah. This was my favorite friend today. We played like this. Dad, am I a Ninja Turtle? And I mean, it just goes and goes and goes and goes. And finally, we got to go pick up Lily at a different school. So I hop out of the car and shut the door. And I'm like, whew, whew. And so, and he likes to stay in the car. And while I go get Lily, and so I walk over there and to where we pick up Lily, and so we get her, and I grab her by the hand, and we're walking, and she's like smiling, and she's a hugger, so she hugs everybody on the way out, and I'm like, so what'd you do? How was school today? Good. A little bit walk a little bit a ways, and I ask her another question, like, hey, did you play on the playground today? Yeah. And so she's the complete opposite. She's just like, one word answers, and it's like pulling teeth to get her to talk about anything for the day. I hear her talking to her friends, and she goes 100 miles an hour, but when it comes to me talking to her, it's just like, I really have to pry. And here's my point with all this, that we have to be parents that are purposeful in this, even when we have difficult kids. If we want to be able to have conversations later, we have to be able to pry now. If you want to have any shot at all about having that conversation with a 16-year-old about talking about their dating relationships or their fantasy life, then you have to be able to pry now and have conversations with your kids now and exercise that and develop that relationship with your kids. It's better to learn how to have a conversation with a 5-year-old, picking them up after school, and learn that skill than it is when they're 16 years old and you just don't have a shot at prying open their minds, their hearts, and having any clue on what's going on in their lives. That's so important. Have those conversations. Pry in if you have to, or just let it happen to you, like if you're having a conversation with Noah, but make yourself available. Number 5, you can't pick your child, but you can pick their friends. Proverbs 13:20 says this, walk with the wise and become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. We were youth pastors and college pastors for 13 years, and if I know one thing, the most important decision that you will ever make in your life, that your kids will ever make in their life, is their decision to follow God, to surrender their heart to Jesus. Now, the second most important decision that you will make is who you walk with, who you hang out with. Because this is absolutely true. This is true for every youngin', every kid on earth. Your friends are going to decide what kind of a person you are. So as parents, we have to be involved. We have to be strategic in who we're letting our kids hang out with and the friends that they pick. And this is going to be one of the most important, as they're younger and growing into this is one of the most important things that you can prepare for engagement with as you're raising young kids into older kids. Who are they hanging out with? When they're hanging out with certain friends, like what do you hear that they've been involved with when they're hanging out with those friends? What happens? What goes on in their house? What do those parents allow to happen in their house? What are they looking at? What are they looking at on phones or computers? Or what movies are they watching over there? How do they talk? What kind of language are they using? You have to have a conversation with your kids. I don't like the influence that those kids are having on you, and you won't be hanging out with those kids anymore.
Number 6, last one. Godly parents don't automatically make godly children. Listen to these 2 verses. Proverbs 30, verse 11 says, "There are those who curse their fathers and do not bless their mothers." Proverbs 13:1 says, "A wise son heeds his father's instructions, but a mocker does not respond to rebukes." Like Proverbs, it teaches us how to stack the deck in our favor as parents. But we do have free-willed children who make their own choices, who will do what they please as they get older. And so our job is just to make it hard on them, to make it hard, not hard on them, to make it hard to get away with those things, to be prayerful, and not just praying at bedtime and at dinner time over our food, but being a prayerful parent that prays over every area of your kids and your grandkids. Pray over their friends. Pray over their dating relationships. Those are the key things that will derail a kid's relationship with the Lord. Our job is to teach them and train them the habits of spiritual disciplines as they're younger, so that when they're older, it wasn't just what they were taught, but it's what they caught from mom and dad.
I'm going to invite the band up, and we're wrapping up, so as these guys come up. There's so much you could talk about with parenting. There's so much wisdom that the Bible gives us for this. I just want to cover a couple more things. I want to emphasize this. Church is never a punishment. Families, church is never a punishment. Seriously, if your kids were getting a bad grade in Spanish, you wouldn't pull them out of Spanish. You'd be like, all right, no more Spanish then if you're getting a bad grade in Spanish. You wouldn't like ground them from Spanish for 2 weeks. No, you'd get them a tutor, you'd take a closer look, you'd have some closer boundaries with them, you'd find someone to help them out. Church is not a punishment. Maybe you have kids that don't want to go to church. My kid doesn't like to go to church because they say it's cliquey, or the youth group is that, or they don't like this, or the music, or the preaching's boring, which probably would never be this church, but who knows? I bet that your kid doesn't always want to go to school either, but you force them to go to school. I bet they feel like school has cliques and different things going on. There's things that they don't like that go on at school, but they still have to go to school. You still make them to go to school. Church is a place where you're going to find healing. Parents, church is a place that you will learn how to love your kids in a biblical way. Church is a place that your kids are going to learn biblical behavior patterns. I mean, tonight we're talking about, with a bunch of youth, true love waits. That's unheard of in our culture these days, but it's still a biblical principle.
Yeah, for their protection.
Church is a place where you as parents will find hope, you'll find encouragement, you'll find direction, and you'll find prayer.
For more information, including upcoming events, how to get plugged in, and details on how to give, visit our website at www.visitonechurch.com/Ripon. You can also find us on social media.